They thought they were breaking her. They thought they were building a cage with their words, but unknowingly they were carving out her platform. Their insults, like bricks, were thrown one after another. But instead of letting them bury her, she stood up on them, one by one, until they became the very throne she now rules from. You see, there's a kind of strength that is only born in the fire. And she walked through that fire, not once, not twice, but every day, holding her head up when the world said to hide. Her face, her body, her difference. These weren't flaws to fix. They were foundations to rise from. She didn't ask for the spotlight. She didn't ask for the spotlight. It found her harshly, cruelly, and without warning. It didn't come wrapped in applause or admiration. No, it arrived as a flood of judgment, a tidal wave of ridicule, and a wildfire of assumptions. Her face wasn't trending because the world saw her heart. It was trending because they refused to look past her skin. They mocked what they couldn't understand. They laughed at what they feared, and they labeled what they never took time to know. But what they didn't realize was that while they were watching to see her fall, she was learning how to fly. She used their words as weights. Every cruel comment lifted, every smirk and dart, every stereotype broken under the pressure of her rise. She didn't shrink. She didn't silence her soul. She found her rhythm in the noise. She started to train emotionally, mentally, spiritually. They thought they were writing her ending, but all they were doing was giving her the ink. And with it, she rewrote her story. A story not defined by pity, not shaped by shame, but carved in courage and wrapped in undeniable, unshakable strength. She turned their echo of hate into an anthem of hope. Keynote 1. Pain became her personal trainer. The comments weren't soft. The criticism didn't come with warning labels. It was sharp, raw, and relentless. But so was she. Every sting of cruelty became a rep. Every rejection was resistance training. She didn't just survive the pain. She built with it. Like muscles tear before they grow stronger, her spirit was stretched in the process. But she kept showing up. She didn't wait for the world to be kind. She learned to be kind to herself. And in the gym of adversity, she developed emotional endurance. She could carry things now, things that used to crush her. She stood taller, walked bolder, and loved herself louder. The pain didn't win. It just revealed how powerful she already was. Keynote 2, her power wasn't loud. It was less than the world expected a dramatic collapse. They waited for her to break, but she didn't give them that performance. She didn't scream to be heard. She didn't clap back with venom. Her power wasn't in her volume. It was in her peace. While the crowd jeered, she journaled. While the world scrolled, she studied. While they laughed, she launched. Ideas, dreams, and declarations. Her revenge was never in retaliation. It was in resurrection. She rose not as a victim, but as a visionary. And her presence now commands a room. Not through noise, but through stillness that speaks. And that's the kind of stillness only survivors know. The kind of calm that makes chaos uncomfortable. Keynote 3. She carried love like a weapon. She could have hated them. She had every reason to, but she didn't. Because hatred is a heavy chain, and she wanted wings. She turned the bitterness they tried to feed her into boldness. She loved herself too much to stay mad, and she loved them too wisely to let their darkness darken her. That kind of grace can't be taught in books. It's forged in fire. It's earned in silence. She learned that love isn't always soft. It's strong. Sometimes the strongest move is forgiveness, not because they deserve it, but because you do. Because freedom tastes better than revenge. Because healing happens when you release the very thing that tried to hold you hostage. Do a stitch. She didn't need to throw stones. Her love disarmed them better than any insult could. Keynote 4. Now she walks where she was once dragged. They dragged her name. They dragged her photo. They dragged her confidence publicly, but she didn't stay down. She studied their scripts, not to repeat them, but to rewrite them. And now she walks across the very ground where they tried to bury her. With elegance, with integrity, with an authority that didn't need to be announced, it's just felt. Because real royalty doesn't come from a crown. It comes from surviving humiliation with your humanity intact. Her walk now It's not for attention, it's for those still crawling through their pain. She walks to remind them, you don't have to stay there. You don't have to believe them, and you don't have to hide your shine, because someone else couldn't handle their own shadow. If someone else couldn't handle. They wrote her story before she ever got a chance to hold the pen. They decided who she was before she even found the mirror. They took one glance, one judgment, one cruel word, and they believed they knew everything about her. They called her weak before she ever got to prove her strength. They whispered insults and shouted shame like it was the truth, but what they didn't know was that the fire inside her was not for their comfort. It was for her rising, and they were never meant to recognize her strength. It wasn't for them. It wasn't for them. It was for the ones like her, who had sat silently in a room where the world mispronounced their worth. She remembered being 12 years old, reading comments that tore her face apart. They said she didn't belong, didn't deserve light, didn't deserve breath. They mocked her features like her reflection was a punchline, but she didn't crumble. No, she cracked open, and something fierce poured out. It wasn't hate, it wasn't bitterness, it was purpose. It was the soft power of someone who had cried long enough and decided no one gets to narrate my life but me. When people try to define you, it's easy to want to explain yourself. It's easy to go back, defend your name, argue your case. But she didn't. She didn't water herself down to fit their comfort. She didn't contort her truth to match their fiction. Instead, she lived loudly, freely, fully. And fully, that was her rebellion. That was her victory. She took back the story by becoming the author of every chapter they said she'd never write. And that's the thing. They can say what they want. They can label, assume, dismiss, and distort. But their version of you only wins if you sit quietly and let it become the truth. She decided her story wouldn't end with their period. She picked up the pen, crossed out their lies, and wrote with the ink of every tear she turned into triumph. Her strength didn't come from silence. It came from sacred defiance, the kind that doesn't scream but simply shines. She didn't fight their fire with fire. She became light. And she learned that you don't have to scream to be powerful. You just have to stand, even if your knees are shaking and your heart feels broken. Even if your voice trembles, even if your past is heavy, even if you don't feel ready. Because healing doesn't look like perfection. It looks like persistence. Let them call you too much, too emotional, too sensitive, too different, too bold. They only say that because they're afraid of someone who no longer begs to be understood. She became that woman. Not because life made it easy, but because life gave her no other choice but to rise or sink. And she rose. Every scar became a sentence. Every insult became a stepping stone. And the beauty of it all? She didn't wait for their apology to heal. She didn't wait for their validation to heal. She didn't wait for their validation to grow. She bloomed in the soil they tried to bury her in. If you're listening right now and you feel like someone else has written your ending, I need you to know this. It is not final. Their words are not prophecy. Their rejection is not truth. Their cruelty is not your identity. Their cruelty is not your identity. You get to define what happens next. You are not stuck. You are not too late. You are not too broken. You are becoming, and becoming is a messy, powerful, holy process that doesn't need permission from anyone. So when they say you can't, let that be a reason to do it louder. When they say you're not enough, remind yourself that you're more than they could ever measure. When they laugh, let their noise fade into the background of your becoming. They don't have to understand your mission to make it real. They don't have to clap for your success for it to matter. She realized this, and it changed everything. She learned that her worth was not up for debate. That no mirror, no comment section, no crowd could define her unless she let them. And she refused. Every morning she looked in the mirror and reminded herself, I am not their version. I am not their version. I am mine. She spoke it until her bones believed it. She whispered it until her soul stood up. She lived it until the reflection staring back stopped flinching. And maybe the most powerful thing she ever did was love herself in a world that taught her not to. She found peace in being misunderstood. She let go of trying to correct the record, because you don't owe anyone an explanation for your existence. Your job isn't to make yourself small so others can feel big. Your job is to shine so that others trapped in the dark, and if they can break out too, her life became a lighthouse. And not loud, and not loud, not angry, not bitter, just steady, just strong, just there. She didn't shout over the noise. They found her in their silence. In their quiet moments of reflection, they remembered her face, not because it matched a mold, but because it defied one. And in a world full of copies, she stayed original. To every person who's ever been reduced to a label, judged by a glance, dismissed before they spoke, you are not their version. You are the sacred, holy, beautifully complicated truth that they'll never be able to sum up. You are the exception to their rule, the answer they didn't expect. And the story they tried to silence, but couldn't. They tried to write her story in ink she didn't approve of. They judged the cover and skipped the chapters. They cast her as weak, strange, and forgettable. But they didn't know they were speaking to a soul born of fire, forged in rejection and wrapped in purpose. She wasn't the kind to fight hate with hate. No, her strength came in silence, in the smile she still wore, in the compassion she still showed, in the refusal to return what she never deserved in the first place. That's where her grace lived, not in performance, not an apology, but in an unshakable identity that had already decided. Their opinions don't set her worth. She didn't scream to be seen. She simply stood tall. Tall. She didn't argue to be understood. She simply lived boldly, and somehow that quiet, powerful grace shook the very foundations of everything thrown at her. Because grace, real grace, is louder than cruelty. It echoes longer than gossip. It withstands what breaks others. And in her life, grace became the rebellion, the crown, the anthem. They gave her every reason to crumble, but she gave the world every reason to hope. This isn't the story of a girl who survived. It's the story of a woman who reigns because she never let hate shrink her into silence. 1. She didn't meet hate on its level. She rose above it. Every cruel word was an invitation to come down, to sink to the level of those who didn't understand her. But she knew, every time you react in anger, you step off your throne to play in the dirt. She wasn't made for that. She was made for higher ground, so instead of throwing back what they threw at her, she built a staircase with it. She used their insults as insight, not into who she was, but into who they were. And that allowed her to stay grounded in something far more powerful than revenge. Peace. That doesn't mean she didn't feel the sting. It doesn't mean the comments didn't bruise. And in doing so, she didn't just change the minds of those who doubted her. She changed the hearts of those who judged her. People saw the glow and assumed it came easy, but they never saw the nights she cried with no one watching. They didn't see the hours spent whispering truth to herself louder than the noise trying to drown her. Her healing was between her and heaven, between her and the mirror, between her and the girl she once believed was broken. But when she healed, the evidence was unmistakable. Her walk changed, her words carried weight. Her presence was different, and not because she wanted attention, but because wholeness glows. You can't fake the kind of strength that's been fought for in secret. She didn't wear her past like shame. She wore it like armor. She didn't need applause to validate it. Her existence alone disrupted every lie told about her. That's what healing does. It may start quiet, but it finishes loud. And her very presence began to speak a truth that silenced the hate. I survived, and I still believe in love. 3. Grace wasn't weakness. It was warfare to some. Grace looks like surrender, like softness, like letting people walk all over you. But they misunderstood what she was doing, and she wasn't backing down. She was building up. Every time she responded with calm instead of chaos, she was reclaiming territory. Every time she chose kindness in the face of cruelty, she was shifting the atmosphere. You don't need to prove your power when you're rooted in peace. She understood that being triggered isn't a flex, it's a leash, and she refused to be led by their provocation. That's warfare. That's mastery. That's real control. And though they thought she was losing by not retaliating, she was winning the greater battle. keeping her soul clean while walking through the mud. It takes extraordinary strength to bless those who curse you, to keep showing up when you're talked about. That was her victory. Grace didn't just protect her, it made her unstoppable. Because while others burned out from bitterness, she burned brighter from forgiveness. 4. Her throne wasn't built by revenge. It was built by redemption. They thought they had the final word, that their labels would stick. That their mockery would mold her. But Grace had other plans. See, Grace doesn't just block what's meant to harm, it transforms it. What they meant for shame became her strength. What they meant to humiliate became her platform. Their judgment wrote her name in rooms they didn't expect her to walk into. That's the divine plot twist. Her throne was built by the very ones who doubted her. Not because she crushed them, but because she didn't let them crush her. And when she finally stood in her fullness and her light, her confidence, her power, she didn't gloat, she didn't retaliate, she didn't return fire. She simply rolled with gentleness, with strength, and with wisdom. Her power wasn't loud. It was lasting. Her reign didn't come from proving a point. It came from fulfilling a purpose. That's the kind of queen the world can't forget. Not because she made noise, but because she made history. She was never asking for attention. She was simply trying to exist. But the world has a way of placing its own definition on what beauty should be, on what worth should look like, on who deserves the spotlight and who should stay silent in the shadows. Her face was different. Her body moved differently. And because of that, the world pointed, whispered, and judged. They tried to define her with labels she never agreed to wear. But she didn't fold, she didn't run, she didn't let the darkness outside seep into the light that burned quietly inside her. Because deep down, she knew something they didn't. She was never created to blend in. She was born to lead. And now the same world that once turned its back now leans in to listen. The same eyes that once avoided her now follow with awe. The same voices that once mocked her now echo her words. She became something bigger than the insult, louder than the shame, stronger than the rejection. Not by fighting with fire, but by showing that love outlasts hate and authenticity always wins. She's not just seen anymore, she's followed. She turned their laughter into lessons. They laughed at her, not because she was funny, but because she was different. They pointed at her photos, shared her videos, and made her the punchline of a joke she never agreed to be in. But instead of letting their cruelty crush her, she turned every laugh into a lesson. She learned that those who mock are often the most wounded themselves. She realized their need to tear her down came from their own fear of standing out, and instead of chasing revenge, she chased purpose. Every time they tried to shame her, she rose higher. Because when you're driven by something greater than being accepted, when you're led by truth instead of approval, you become unstoppable. Their ridicule became her fuel. And soon the laughs died down, because the world couldn't ignore the strength in her voice and the love in her actions. She became the role model she never had. She never saw herself on billboards. She never saw a face like hers in the movies. Growing up, the world told her in silent but suffocating ways that she didn't belong on the covers, in the magazines, in the spotlight. So she stopped waiting to be represented and chose to represent herself. She stood up. She spoke out. She told her story not for sympathy, but for strength. And little by little, people began to notice, not just for her courage, but for the light she carried. She didn't just step into the spotlight. She expanded it. She made room for others like her. And in doing so, she became the role model she never had. Girls who once hid now stand taller. Children who once cried themselves to sleep now speak with boldness. Because she showed them you don't have to look like the world to lead it. You don't have to fit the mold to shatter the ceiling. You just have to be brave enough to be yourself. And love enough to never apologize for it. She let her scars speak louder than her silence. She could have chosen silence. It would have been easier. She could have let the shame swallow her whole, kept her pain private, and disappeared into the background. But something inside her refused. She knew there was power in her scars, power in her story, power in every moment she survived what should have destroyed her. So instead of hiding, she spoke. Instead of shrinking, she stood tall. Instead of softening her truth to make others comfortable, she let her truth roar. And the world listened, because there's something holy about someone who chooses honesty over perfection. There's something magnetic about someone who wears their healing out loud. Her scars stopped being wounds and started becoming wisdom. And suddenly, people didn't just see her, they saw themselves in her. They followed her not because she was flawless, but because she was real. Unapologetically, courageously real. She didn't just change minds, she changed hearts. The internet might have made her viral, but it was her spirit that made her unforgettable. She didn't win people over with pity, she won them with power. She didn't demand sympathy, she inspired respect. Because she didn't walk in bitterness, she walked in love. She forgave those who never said sorry. She smiled at those who once mocked her. She reached out to people who once turned their backs. Why? Because she understood something rare. Hate may be loud, but love lasts longer. Criticism fades, but compassion builds. She didn't come to prove herself. She came to serve others through her story. And in doing so, she didn't just change the minds of those who doubted her. She changed the hearts of those who judged her. Judged her.